17 minutes is a sliver of time. In 17 minutes, you can take a shower, or prepare a meal, or watch half of 2.5 Men. I was tempted with Charlie Sheen jokes this morning. But in the next 17 minutes, someone, somewhere in the United States will be dead. A victim of suicide, one of the 30,000 suicides we have every year in the United States. It wasn't that long ago that I slipped a plastic bag over my head, fed out of the depression that had sucked all the joy out of my life. But then I thought of something that Ernest Hemingway once said. The reason you not commit suicide, he said, is because you remember how swell life gets after the hell is over. Unfortunately, as some of you may know, Ernest Hemingway did not follow his own advice. Because in 1966, he put the barrel of a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger with his big toe. I put a face and a name on mental illness as I tell my story, to realize that we're talking about a brain disease, not a character defect. Stigma is potentially fatal because people don't seek help when help is available, through medication, through counseling. It may be for you an elderly neighbor like Don Cornelius, the Soul Train founder who shot himself earlier this month. Or a young teenager, 15-year-old Drew Ferraro de la Crescenta, who jumped headfirst off the top of his school 2 weeks ago, dying in front of his friends. Or it may be a member of your own family.
I tell you all of that, you probably already know it, is to tell you how impressed I am being here in the top 8 universities in the country. To give you a message of something that I hope will save your lives and save the lives of those you touch. It is a message that I hope will save you from the pain and the shame and the humiliation that I faced, had I heard when I was an undergraduate. To Southern California tomorrow. My wife Noha and I are going to have a layover in my home state of Arkansas. I want to show my Egyptian wife another part of our country, particularly at this time of year, and see all the fall colors that we don't see in Southern California. But also, more importantly, I went to visit 3 graves. When I was your ages, I thought the saddest day in my life was December 17th, 1964. I was 14, and that was the day that my mother suddenly died of a ruptured brain aneurysm. She was only 34. My brother's 7th birthday, my brother Jerry's 7th birthday, was the next day. And our baby brother Randy was only 3 years old and has no memory of his mom. But for a long time, that was the saddest day until 28 years later. At that time, I had lost my marriage, I had lost my university faculty position, I was living in a roach and mouse-infested house with an ex-convict. And when I got home one afternoon, there was a note on the table from my housemate telling me I needed to call my stepmother because there had been a death in the family. I assumed it was my dad. He had been critically ill with heart disease for several weeks in the hospital. When I called, my stepmother's oldest sister, May, answered the phone. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. I found him in the woods this afternoon." It was the moment that forever defined my life. It was the moment that is the reason why I'm standing here speaking to you this evening. My brother's decomposing body was found by two dirt bikers as they raced through the woods. He'd been missing for 2 weeks. They found his body sitting at the foot of a pine tree with a empty bottle of Jack Daniels on one side and an empty bottle of prescription narcotics on the other side. Identification was difficult officially, but his driver's license told the story of the man who had been missing for 2 weeks in that little Arkansas town. Later, the medical examiner confirmed the identity with dental records and ruled the death suicide. He was 35, a year older than our mother was when she died. He left behind a wife and 2 little boys, ages 10 and 8, Christopher and little Jerry, I should say. At the funeral home, Renee told me, his widow told me, that Jerry had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder a few years before when he was in the Army, and then discharged without ever receiving treatment. And once he was out of the Army and back in civilian life, he was too ashamed and too afraid of stigma to go see a psychiatrist. But the VA hospital did provide a drunk tank for veterans to go to dry out after a drinking binge. And it was from a drunk tank that Jerry called me one afternoon in February. I tried to get him to come up and stay with me in the house for a while in Northwest Arkansas. He was in Little Rock at the time. "Oh, no, I got to get home to Renee and the boys," he said. Those were the last words I ever heard my brother say. I tried to speak at his funeral, but tears choked every word I tried to say as I tried to tell his little boys and those in attendance how kind and generous he had been after my divorce and unemployment by letting me live with him for a while. But since I couldn't speak then, I dedicate my work and my writing now to his memory.
How would you encourage like a friend or a family member? How would you tell them that they have like a mental illness and encourage them to get an examination?
Exactly, and that's a good question. How do you encourage a friend or a family member? You think they have a mental illness and help them to get help or encourage them to get help. Sometimes all you have to say is sit down and listen. That's usually the key, is listening. What's going on? What's happening? And maybe they will begin talking about the depression. They'll begin talking about if they're seriously have another illness, which in schizophrenia, in which they will see people or hear noises. That's usually a good clue that they're going to need some help. And then encourage them to get help because you know somebody or you read about somebody who has gotten help and their lives have returned to normal. But just encourage them to do that. But the main thing is listening. Can you imagine how many people have jumped out of windows in the Golden Gate Bridge, in front of trains, when all they needed to do was talk to somebody who would really listen? That's what, yes. Austin?
Austin, yeah. And my question is similar. I have a friend, a really good friend, who is diagnosed with bipolar and depression. And I was wondering, what words of encouragement would you give to those who are going through that?
Of going through the bipolar aspect of it?
Yes.
The words of encouragement I would give is the same words that I get from my therapist every week, is that you can live an abundant life, but you have to take some control over your life, and that is regular sleep hygiene, 7 to 8 hours. Those of us who are manic, especially bipolar 2, hypomanic, we go without sleep. I got along with 2 hours a night for a long time because I had my hands in so many activities. Self-care is the key there. Good sleep patterns, eating, exercise. Those are the 3 things that I found that stabilized me the most. And of course, medication compliance. Many people who have a mental illness start feeling better, then they stop taking their meds. And that's the worst thing that can happen. Don't stop taking the medication. You're going to be on that for the rest of your life. You'll have to change it every once in a while under psychiatric care, but don't change it.